The modern stalwart Virginia Woolf once said, "Every secret of a writer's soul, every experience of his life, every quality of his mind is written large in his works." Very good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and also good afternoon and good evening to the other parts of the world. Today, we have Dr. Sarita Sharma as our speaker, and she will be dealing with the nuances of creative writing. We all love writing, don't we? We tend to bring out our inner thoughts. Basically, we tend to uncover what we feel like or what we, in a way, do in bringing out our own creativity. But writing is a complex process. The nuances, the intricacies, the ramifications are a difficult deal, actually, to carry out. And to discuss more on that, we have our speaker for the day, and to just brief you all about her, Dr. Sarita Sharma is an academician, author, poet, and a translator. She is currently engaged as editor-in-chief at TAFFD magazine, USA. She mostly writes in English and translates from regional Indian languages to English. She has 9 published books to her credit, including a collection of short stories, a collection of poems, translated fictions, and edited books. She conducts workshops on creative writing in different places all over the country. At present, she is working on a book on fiction titled Being Unbeing, and another on Indira Goswami titled Subalternity in the Pages of Mamani Resham Goswami. Ma'am, we are absolutely honored to host you for the first time, and it's all yours now. Over to you, Sarita, ma'am.
Thank you, Kaushik. A very warm hello to everyone here. It gives me great pleasure to be here amongst the speakers here in the talk series that I have been watching. And I must thank the organizers at AIFEST for providing this wonderful opportunity to all of us. So we are getting creative today, right? All right. From the spontaneous overflow of powerful emotions to let's get creative, teaching the nuances of creative writing inside a classroom. Literature writing per se has come a long way. It has traversed myriad paths, stopped at some destinations, bended along the bends, and changed with the changing times. But it has always been in motion, always evolving, always bringing in new things into itself. I move around teaching creative writing to people of different age groups, profession, and streams of study. And in the course of our interactions and discussions, we often come around to discussing the relative importance of these kind of workshops or classes, the relative importance of having creative writing classes. I feel that these debates are a part of the eternal nature versus nurture debates, which we need to address from time to time, and we cannot escape these debates. So before moving on to the main topic in hand, I would quickly like to elucidate on a few points regarding this. I believe that there are 2 types of writers in this world. The one would be who are naturally endowed with the creative juices. They have creativity flowing inside them, and from their thoughts to the words, putting their thoughts across through words would not come across as much of a problem for them. These kind of writers do not require much editing. They are the ones who can, just sit and churn out 4 or 5 pages at least without having to lift up the paper, their heads from the papers or the laptops, as you may say so. So these are writers who are definitely there, but to my utter dismay, there are very, very few of them. We can say a handful of these kind of people who are naturally endowed with so much of creativity inside them. The rest, the other category would be of the rest of people, thousands of people like you and I, people who definitely like to write, and yes, people who definitely like to write, and they have so many thoughts flowing inside the mind that many times we get overwhelmed by our own thoughts. And then we really cannot focus on what we need to focus, or cannot exactly put to thoughts, put to words thoughts. So there are these kind of people like me. I would say we abound. We are around. A lot of us are there. And many times we feel that we do not have the exact repertoire of words in order to express the kind of emotions, the deepest feelings that we feel. Or again, there are some people who may not know a metaphor from a simile. We have to understand that everyone who wants to write, everyone who is a writer, and everyone who is who has some kind of instinct towards this aspect of literature may not necessarily come from English major background, may not have the luxury of having studied the terminology, the theories, the terms, and all. So we have to understand that also. And yes, as I was saying, that we may not know how to put our thoughts into words, and we may not know what to avoid, what to hone some more. And at the same time, it's important to understand the genre that we may have the capacity to go for. Like, for instance, if anyone wants me to write a historical fiction, I may not be able to do it because I feel that I'm simply not cut out for that kind of writing. So I have to understand my genre. So it may not be possible for everyone to understand your own genre, what you'd be comfortable to write with. There are so many forms, so many ways of writing, and we may not know. So this is where I feel that mentorship or classes, workshops on creative writing can help us. Now, let me tell you that no creative writing class or mentor in this world can guarantee you the next bestseller. For that matter, it cannot even guarantee that you will write anything or publish anything. But at the end of these sessions, as my experiences over the years have shown, at the end of these sessions, you would have had an understanding, an overview of your own strengths and weaknesses as a writer. You would have an understanding of what kind of literature is being done nowadays, and what to avoid, what to go for, what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, what it means to take up a project, and how you are supposed to do justice to something that you have taken up to portray in words. So it's like whether I should take up a piano or a violin lesson or not, if I'm interested in playing music. So I think this is how I see creative writing classes, and this is where I see the importance of creative writing classes as an instructor myself, and as someone who has seen people struggle to write, in spite of having the thoughts, in spite of having the words, and in spite of having the intention to write. Okay, so on that note, I think I will move on to the topic. I have divided the whole topic into 3 segments, depending on the 3 important genres that we have in literature today: poetry, short stories, and novels. What I'm trying to do today is very basic, very preliminary, because of the paucity of time, of course. And at the same time, because I don't know, this medium does not allow us to be very, very interactive. I cannot see you, and I feel like I'm talking to a room. I have been doing this, but somehow that personal touch is lacking, and when that lacks, a lot of factors change in a discussion. So anyway, I have divided it into 3 segments. Please feel free to interrupt me at any time in the conversation, because I would much rather be answering your queries or discussing your doubts rather than sticking to my points. Yes, I suffer from short-term amnesia, so I have my points jotted down. So, all right, now I think I'll begin with the first segment today, that is poetry. Now, poetry, as I understand, is one of the most condensed and personal and very, very difficult genre in order to express oneself. People think that because it is short, it may be easy to do poetry. And we normally have a feeling that, okay, because it's short, we don't need to think much about it, we don't need to put a lot of time into it, so it must be easy. There are so many poets in this world, writing poetry is easy, poems to kya hai ho jata hai types. We have that kind of thinking amongst people, but let me tell you that poetry, I think, is the most difficult to write. Why it is difficult to write is because of the condensed form of this genre. We not only have to condense our thoughts here, but at the same time, we have to express our innermost feelings and emotions. So I think that is where the difficulty level starts. So if you're one of those poets whose thoughts freely flow into words, I think I must congratulate you. There are very few of people like you there, actually. But if you are someone who would want to write, who have so many thoughts juxtaposing inside you, but you are at a loss of words or at a loss of the correct way of expressing them, then I think I have a few tips for you, which you may find useful. So the first thing I would like to say is to gather your thoughts. First of all, you have to zero down on what you want to write about. Not everyone can write about everything. Now, I think I am a very bad hand when it comes to expressing innermost romantic thoughts or intimacy of the physical and emotional kind. I think I'm a little bad in expressing that. So if I come to that point in my writing where I need to express something like that, then I'll definitely think for a while and gather my thoughts. So the first thing that I would like to say, if you want to write a good poem, is gather your thoughts. Think about what you want to write. Zero in on that one particular emotion or that one particular thought that you want to describe in your poem. To begin with, we must, I think, always take up free verse. For beginners, it becomes difficult to experiment in other forms of poetry. Like there are so many difficult forms like haiku, sonnet, rhymes. So there are so many different types of meters. I would suggest a beginner to stick to free verse. So and that is what my experience as a creative as a teacher of creative writing tells me. So let's stick to free verse and let's gather our thoughts. All right. So if I want to write, suppose about a war, if I want to write about a war, so what is the associated paraphernalia that comes along with the word war? So I have to think of that. So naturally, when I talk of war, I'll talk of soldiers, I'll talk of bloodbaths, I'll talk of unnecessary, meaningless violence. So I think we could just place these words randomly and at first, to begin with, we just place these words randomly and think what we can do with these words. Step by step, you will definitely have your expressions coming up. You'll have your sentences coming up after you have the words with you. And then you have to decide, how am I going to proceed? What am I going to write? Am I going to just stick to talking about the bloodbath in the fields, or am I also going to talk about the emotional upheavals of a soldier who's in the field, who's fighting a war, a war which is not a personal war for him, but which he's doing it because it is his duty as a soldier. This is where your gathering of thoughts will help you. So you have to first zero in on what am I exactly trying to portray. Okay. So after this, we okay. Now, poetry has become cliched. We understand that to a very to a very large extent. What we have been doing is we have been repeating the same things again and again and again, the same kind of expressions, the same kind of ways of telling things, the same kind of words also in so many places. So we have to avoid doing that. We have to bring in our own originality, our own way of expressing and feeling a thing. See, when you look at something, your way of reacting to it and someone else's way of reacting to it will definitely be different. You may be touched by subjects which I may not feel very keenly about. So that is where our individuality lies. And you will have your own way of expressing things, your own typical pronunciation, your own expressions, choice of words. So when writing a poetry, you have to bring in that originality. You cannot compare your beloved to the sun and the to the moon and the sun all the time. You have to stop doing that. You have to think of different ways of doing it. In one of the poems, I had seen someone talk about the how he finds the drowsy face of his beloved so very romantic. He finds it extremely beautiful and romantic. So, all right, I would not want to talk about the merit of this particular expression, but of course, this expression has originality. This is just an example that I'm giving you. So we must aim at coming up with our own individual expressions, our own way of reacting to anything. You cannot always look at what others have done and try to imitate the same. You have to bring in your own expressions. They may sound funny to you initially. Initially, they may sound funny to you, or they may not sound good enough to you, but that will improve over time. You have to start writing your own story. You have to start telling your own thing in order for the flow to set in. Just cannot stay stuck in someone else's expression and expect your writing to improve automatically. That does not happen. That does not happen. So I think originality of words, originality of expressions is something which you have to look into yourself. You have to think what makes the thought different from someone else's, what makes it original enough. Human emotions over the years have been same. We talk of love, we talk of sadness, we talk of anger, we talk of the nat rasas, as they are said in Indian literature. The rasas will always be the same, but what makes your particular writing stand out is the originality that you put into it, the you that gets inside the writing, that gets inside the rasas. So I think that's important, and that's one thing which you should always keep in mind, irrespective of the kind of words that are coming to you, irrespective of the kind of expression that you are having at that particular moment. You may not be happy with that. It's all right. But first, bring them in. Bring on the originality first, and then we'll think of refining and polishing it as time goes by. You have to now when you think of poems, you cannot just this and that, and my beloved looks like a moon, and she's this and she's that. You cannot do that. You have to appeal to the senses of the readers. When a reader reads a poem, why would a reader read a poem, or why would you read a poem if you were a reader? It has to appeal to you in some way or the other. It has to strike at your chords. So there are so many ways in which you can do it. You have to make use of images, you have to make use of metaphors, similes, which are like comparisons with different elements, like as in the past they would say, my beloved is as beautiful as the moon. We do not do that anymore, but we may have different kinds of comparisons to bring them in. So you have to think. Writing poetry, as I told you earlier, is not a very easy job. It is a difficult job, and you need to give some thought to it. You need to think, unless and until you're one of the ones who have creativity flowing all the time around them, and the right expressions, right words with the right thoughts juxtaposing all the time. So we have to make use of images, we have to make use of metaphors and similes in order to drive home the point about what we are feeling and why we are feeling that. Now, I'll just give you a small example regarding, suppose I'm trying to talk about a middle-class woman in my poems. I'm trying to talk about a middle-class woman. So I cannot just write she was a middle-class woman, she came from this area. I cannot do that. That would not be poetry. So what I have to do is that I have to present an image which gives you an idea that, okay, she is a middle class woman. So what I could do is, maybe I could say that I could talk about the bun that typically comes with Indian middle class women. They have this well-oiled and tightly done up bun, which is symbolic of the middle class woman. Or I could talk about the big red dot of vermilion with nur on her forehead or in the on her head. So that would be symbolic of what a middle class woman looks like, and then the readers would relate that particular image to the particular person, and there we have such an image where and also something where the reader may find something in common with, because even if you yourself may not be, or I myself may not be that kind of a woman who makes a bun and puts a red vermilion dot on her forehead, but I would still be able to identify with this because I may have seen so many of them on the streets. So that is how it goes. That is how we build an image in order to suit the kind of the kind of poetry that we are trying to come up with. So we have to do that. And now there's another example that, you want to talk about the happy young lad. So you just cannot say that, okay, the young boy was very happy. So you have to create an image of a happy young boy, a young child who is very happy. Maybe you could say something like, his face glowed in the sunshine as his heart hummed a cheerful tone. His face glowed in the sunshine as his heart hummed a cheerful tone. So that gives us an image of a happy young child who is happy about something. So then from these we can move on to other expressions. So this kind of sets the tone. Now, very often than not, I see that students in creative writing classes are obsessed with the first line or the title of the poem. Believe me, I have published poems with no titles at all. I somehow cannot give a title to some of my poems, which I feel that, okay, if I give this title, it would be an injustice to that section of my poem. So it happens. It's all right to not have a title. It's all right to begin a poem in the middle and then move on to other things. You do not have to obsess about the first line about how I'm going to start. Don't just think and waste your time. Just go ahead and write it. There's something called editing, which is a marvelous gift to us humans. So we can do that. So just pour in your thoughts. Now, for anyone to be a good poet, one definitely has to read poetry. Now, by reading, I'm not saying that we imitate the poets or their thoughts or the ways of expressions or their words. We do not do that. But yes, we must read good poems, good poetry, in order to cultivate the poem within us. Why is it important to read is that you need to create your own interest also in that area. And you need to know how many different areas there are, how many different forms of expressions there are. So if you are in the habit of reading, I think you already have won a large part of the battle. So we need to read. We have to be readers first before we can become creators. So And the next thing, while writing poetry, practice is very important. We cannot expect our first poem to be that miraculously extremely good poem. We cannot expect that to happen to us. We need to practice, we need to edit, we need to revise on what we have written. A very clever way of doing this, as said by so many experts, I'm not saying this, I'm simply reiterating what the experts say, is that you write your poem and then you keep it in a place where you do not read it for another 10 to 15 days. And after that a number of days, you bring the poem out and then you read it again. So it is usually seen that when you revise your poem, then you definitely see something which you may not be very happy about. So you can go back to changing it, or you may not be happy about the entire thing. It's all right. We need to practice. Practice is the only tool that we have in our hand, which can make our art perfect. So go back to the poem, revise it. If you're not happy with a few words, we can change it. If you're happy with the way things are, fine, well and good. And that's how we edit our own work. And that's how the concept of editing seeps into writing. Now, I have seen many people change their words, change the expressions, change whole lines and whole paragraphs. So that's absolutely all right. We do not have to hit the bull's eye in the very first strike. We cannot hope to do that. As I was telling you, that there are thousands of people like us who have to think, who have to really think and edit our thoughts in order for it to become publishable or readable even. So that's all right. And after you write that poem, if you are satisfied with, okay, fine, I have written a good poem, then I suggest that you try to read it out to someone who understands poetry. It doesn't necessarily have to be someone, a big writer, or your professor. You would just start with your own friends, people you are comfortable with, but people who will not just toe the line, but they will give you an idea, a review of what you have done. So anyone who is into poetry should be able to do that. So when doing this, try to read the poem aloud. That I have felt that that gives a lot of it involves so many senses when we are reading. The sense organs are involved, like the eyes are involved, the ears are involved, the tongue is involved in speaking, and that stimulates the thinking part of the brain. That stimulates the brain, and it gives out if there are some expressions which do not sound good enough to your ears, you can change them. So your ears are also a very good organ for review of your own work. So read the poem aloud to someone who you trust, someone who will give you good suggestion, and then if you are confident enough, if you feel that, okay, fine, this can be a good enough poem from me, then you can move on to the next stages. So that's how we move forward. We spoke of the importance of reading, the importance of practicing, the importance of creating a vocabulary by writing whatever words come to us when you think of a particular topic. Then we spoke of images, the importance of images, similes, and metaphors, and most importantly, personalizing the experience, putting that personal touch. That is, I think, most important of all. You should come out through your poems. So I don't know at this point if I'm supposed to wait for some questions or I'm just supposed to move on. Abhishek, could you help me in this? Or he doesn't hear me? I don't know. Okay.
Yeah.
So,
hello? Hello?
Yes, Abhilash. Yes, Abhilash.
Ma'am, you can carry on. We will take up the questions towards the end.
Okay, towards the end. Fine. Okay, all right. So I think, see, because of the paucity of time, we'll not be able to do advanced, advanced discussions on these. But I hope I will be able to cover the basics at least. So the next genre of literature, which is back in fashion nowadays, would be, would be short story writing. Now, many of us have stories unfolding within us. Many of us have so many anecdotes that have happened to us that we may have witnessed or we may have heard from someone. We find it interesting and we want to talk about these. So, so this is how a short story is born. It is born with an idea of a story. All right. So, short stories are basically not the full life story, but a slice of life, a part of a life, or a part of something which someone may have experienced. So these are what short stories are. And short stories are better kept short. We, of course, have many types of short stories nowadays. We have the micro short stories, 4 or 5 liners, then the standard short stories, which may be 4 to 5 pages, and of course there are flash short stories again. So many different varieties. So you can start at some place, and if you feel that okay, fine, this is where I should stop, you may stop it. Okay, more on that later on. So yes, as I said. Short stories are slices of life, and we should not and we cannot talk about an entire life in that period. All right, there are a few short stories where a person's entire journey, right from the cradle to the grave, was there in the short stories, but that requires a lot of expertise, and so I would not recommend it to people who are just beginning. So I would say just stick to something, a part or an anecdote or a memory from childhood, which is a part of your growing up days, or an anecdote, and just stick to it. Now, short stories do not have to begin in the beginning. Short stories may begin in the end, and then end in the beginning. So we do not have to start with there was once a very poor man, or there was once a very beautiful woman. We do not have to do that. We can just start at the point where the story in the life of that particular person begins. Like there is one of the stories which I read recently. It starts with I simply loved the way she combed her hair. So I think this is a very different kind of an expression, a very noble way of starting a short story. But then it captured my imagination. Yes, and that is what we are planning to do here. We want to capture the imagination of the readers, so we do not have to start at the beginning. We can start anywhere we want to, with any kind of expressions we want to. Now, short stories give us a little larger areas to work on than poetry. Short stories are can be longer compared to poems, and we have a larger area to uh, showcase our creativity. So here again, I would say, first of all, think of what you want to write. What is it that you want to write? There can be a short story about anything, absolutely anything. As I said, the one where the person says that I was absolutely in love with the way she combed her hair. The short story eventually was about the comb. You may not. I'm sure most of the people will find it funny. I was also very surprised towards the end. So it was about the comb which the person goes and buys in the market. He goes in order to buy the comb, and in the process, what happens to him, and when he brings the comb back home, the person who combs it. So that's the kind of story that you'll see. So short stories can be about anything. and everything. You just have to, as in poetry, you just have to gather your thoughts first. What exactly am I trying to say through my story? What am I trying to prove through my story? So that's how you think of this, how I'll begin, and then I'll end it in this point. So two things to be kept in mind while writing a short story. One would be your beginning and the other would be your end. So where you begin and where you end would be very, very fundamental to short story writing. You must know your beginning and you must know your end. You must know where to put it up. You do not have to elaborate as you would while writing a full book of fiction. You do not have to elaborate. You do not even have to explain the intentions of the characters. You do not have to do that. You simply tell your story and stop it at the place where you feel that there is more to it, but at this moment, this is it. So you have to know that. That, of course, comes with some amount of practice. Short story writing, as I said earlier, no genre of writing is easy enough. So mentors may be helpful in this area. So there may be if there is someone who can help you, who can read your stories, who can tell you. I think you are blessed that way. So I was talking about the beginning and I was talking about the end. So these are two very important areas of a short story. So the beginning and the end of it. Short stories may not be as condensed as a poem would be, but yes, short stories also should not be unnecessarily elaborated. They also should come compact, condensed. So we need to practice to condense our thoughts, to not simply go on explaining certain things. Like, let me give you an example here. She clapped her hands in glee. Yes, she clapped her hands in glee. I think in the context, if I write, she clapped her hands. On hearing the news, she clapped her hands. I think in glee may not be required. In the same manner, she jumped with her feet high up in the air. She jumped with her feet high up in the air. So I think you can do away with a few words in these sentences. So I think that's how we condense our thoughts, and that's how we avoid elaborating on a short story. So that's one thing which we should keep in mind. Yes. We need to have a core point in the entire story, around a point or an idea around which the story would revolve, or it could be a character around whom the story revolves. So we need to have a core in a short story, a basic idea. Through which we should hold the story together. We should hold the story together, and then you could move around that base. So it's important to have a core idea in short stories. So, as I said earlier, gathering your thoughts is the main homework that you are doing before writing a short story. The rest of it is you are doing it. So the homework is that you are gathering your thoughts. You are planning it in your mind. This is how I'll move. So you need to have a skeleton, a sketch in place. This is how I'll move, and this is how I'll begin. This is how I'll move on to the middle, and this is how I'll end. So that homework you have to do. And if you find you are not getting good results out of this, so here again I would say practice. We need to practice some. We need to take suggestions some, and everything should be all right. And again, in order to convey some ideas, let us not just use abstract expressions. I think we should try to bring in images, concrete images so that the readers can relate to what you are saying. The readers can relate to what you are saying, and the readers will then identify themselves with the story, and then they'll be tempted to read some more of you. So avoid abstract expressions, and at the same time, avoid cliches, I would say. Now, to be or not to be is an expression used by Shakespeare. It is Shakespeare's. It is not yours. You cannot pass it off as yours. I mean, you of course, you cannot pass it off as yours. No one will. People who read you will know that this is Shakespeare's expression, but you will not do justice to your story if you make your character say to be or not to be, in order to describe his or her confused state of mind. So you have to bring in your own originality of expression in this. So in this manner, you cannot imitate the classics. You cannot imitate the great, or for that matter, you cannot imitate the one you are reading. Could be anyone. So bring in that originality of expressions. Avoid cliches. To be or not to be is a cliche now. All right, it is a classic, no doubt, but it is a cliche in the expressions. So we can avoid these kind of expressions. We need to. So your character will have to bring his or her own imagery, his own way of saying that he or she is confused. So that is how your short story will become different from the rest of them. So we have spoken about not bringing in abstract expressions and not repeating the cliches and trying to say the same thing in a different manner, because as I already said, emotions have been done. We will be talking about the same kind of emotions, but how we talk it, how we put our thoughts in words is what matters now. And we've spoken about practice and yes, editing. After you've finished writing your story, kindly edit it. There should not be any spelling mistakes, punctuation, grammar, sentence construction. We need to keep in mind these things also. If we want to write in English, we should be confident about the kind of language that we write. We cannot pass off a grammatically incorrect sentence as a license, as a writer's license. We cannot do that. It happens in poetry sometimes. Sometimes it happens that we may not stick to the prescribed format, sentence format, or we may even coin new words, new expressions in order to do justice to the thoughts that we are having. But in a short story, you have to be extremely careful about your language. Your grammar should be impeccable. And punctuation, many of them nowadays do not put punctuation, but that is again, I think it depends on your own way of handling your stories, your own personal touch to it. Even I have been guilty of not putting punctuation marks in some of my stories, but these have been accepted, and so that way there are no complaints. And yes, so you have to be careful about your grammar, your words, and avoiding cliches and abstract expressions would do well for a short story. And at the end, as I said in poetry, in short story also, I would like to say the same thing. Bring in your originality. You are the only one who knows your story. You are the only one who has the know-how of the narrative that is inside of you. So bring in your own story. Do not think, do not fear that, all right, I will be interested in reading my story. I will be interested in reading this particular thing. No, do not do that. Tell your story. We'll think about the readers. We'll think about how the readers come, whether they come or not. So that is not for us to think. We should just aim at telling a good story and telling it right, telling it with all the nuances of a good storyteller. So we should make the images come alive in front of the readers. We should give them enough food to think. So we should just aim at creating a good story right writing it right. The rest of the things, okay. Do not think about the result, as Lord Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita. Excuse me. Yes. So I think we've done short story as well. If the questions come in, then I'm sure the discussion will also change its track. I really do not know what kind of questions have come up or what may come up. Anyway, we'll do that later on. Now, fiction is no different from a short story. Fiction is almost like a short story, but with a much, much larger scope in hand. And let me tell you that along with poetry or next to poetry, fiction is more difficult to write than a short story. That's what my personal experience says, and that's what my experiences as a creative, as an instructor of creative writing also tells me that fiction is very, very difficult to do justice to. Fiction has a larger scope, and in the same manner, a scope for many characters to come in, many anecdotes to unfold, many things to be said. So that is where you come to the point of research. Before embarking on writing of fiction, I think it's very important for us to research on the topic that we chose to write. As in a short story and poetry, I said that we need to gather our thoughts. We need to before writing a poem, we need to gather our thoughts. In the same manner, before writing a short story, we need to sit and gather our thoughts and our words. But before writing a fiction, I would tell you that we need to have our research in place first. If I want to talk about a particular person, that person cannot come from just nowhere. That person needs to have a background. That person needs to come from a typical time set. It could be the 80s, 90s, 2000. Now, a novel for artificial intelligence has already been written, and that person, Mr. Tom Ross, will be on the series. I think in one of these days he'll be talking about his novel. So the first novel for artificial intelligence has already come. Is already out there for us to read. So when you say a novel on artificial intelligence, then you have to do your background research well. You have to talk about artificial intelligence the way it is in today's scenario. So in the same way, if I want to talk about a character in the 80s, then I have to know my 80s well. I have to know what kind of clothes the people wore in the 80s, what kind of stock language expressions that they used, what kind of general thoughts that people would have. And I also need to have a clear political and social background of that area. So before you write your fiction, you cannot not research into the time frame. So as said by many other experts, fiction writing is more of research, they say. If you have taken, if you have earmarked 5 years for fiction writing, then I think at least 2 should go into your research work. So along with the background, now what you need to do in writing a fiction is getting your characters right. Now, you have to think about your characters. Of course, some characters come about as the story progresses, but some you have to think beforehand. Or even as the story progresses, you need to have different sets of vocabulary, different sets of expressions, different personal traits for the characters. So I think writing fiction becomes difficult because you need to do a lot of theory work also along with writing. So that's where the difficulty, the quotient arises, I think. So you have to think of the characters. You cannot have the same way of talking, the same way of expressions for all the characters. That would make it very dull. So you don't want to do that with your fiction. So think of characters. You have to have suitable names. You need to have suitable expressions for them, the kind of clothes they wear, the kind of personality they have. So all these goes into your background research. So before we begin a fiction, let us research first. Number 2 would be, again, as I said, your original story. No one is going to tell your story for you. It is you who has to tell your story. So it's extremely important that you do not tell someone else's story. Tell your own story. Uh, Tell what appeals to you. Write about things that appeal to your senses, that you feel very strongly about. As I said in the beginning of the talk, that I may not be a very good person to write historical novels because I simply do not have the kind of patience to think about what the rajas and maharajas may have in mind, or what the queens with their uh, all those people working for them, so many a retinue of servants, what must be going through in their minds. I would not have the patience to dwell in that. I would not even have the required vocabulary to talk about the palaces, the domes and castles. I would not have that. So I will not venture into that territory. I'll talk about issues which are close to my heart. I'll talk about areas which I feel I'm comfortable in. Yes, I have to think about my comfort level also, if I want to tell a good story. Yes, there have been writers who have moved beyond their comfort level and they have come up with extraordinary stories. But yes, again, as I said, that is for people who there are people like that. Not all of us are like that. So we need to stick to drier areas also. So as I was saying, after research, you think of a subject which is close enough to your heart, a subject which you will do justice to after having written it or in the process of writing. So that you need to keep in mind. Then the plot becomes important, whether you want to base it around the character, his or her life, or you want to bring in references from outside and then move into the characters, or you want to talk about the social milieu in general and then talk about the characters. That you have to decide how you are going to move ahead with your plot. Your plot should be interesting. Your plot should be arresting. Your plot should be something which people want to read. Every page that you finish in should be a marker for the reader to move on to the next. So you have to make it interesting enough for them. So it'll be interesting only when you are comfortable with the topic, only when you can do justice to the topic that you have in hand. Yes, and writing is a very personal experience, as I said. So you should bring in your personal touch, your personal expressions, your personal idiosyncrasies into the writing, and at the same time, you should make a habit of writing. I cannot just say that, okay, fine, today onwards I'm going to write. And I cannot expect to churn out astounding pieces. I cannot hope to do that. So I should have a habit of writing. I should write every day, at least for at least 4 or 5 pages. I should try to write in a day, and that's how I will develop a habit of writing, and that's how I will better myself. So that is the kind of practice that I'm giving myself. So this stands true not just for fiction, but for all other genres, as I said, short story, poetry, everything. You need to write, you need to revise, you need to edit, and especially in fiction writing, why I say that we need to write every day is because we may run the risk of losing track if we do not write every day, or if we do not go back to the fiction in hand every day. So that should be done. And again, yes, we have to be very careful about our language, about our grammar, about the words that we are using, and yes, there is this wonderful word called editing, which we can do at the end of each chapter, or at the end of each page, if you may so feel. Or, as I said, in case of short stories, you write something, you put it back, you do not touch it for 10, 15 days, you move on to the next in the interim period, you keep on writing something else, and then you go back to it after a fixed time, and then you edit it, revise it. So that can also be done. But editing becomes important for many of us. Yes, we should not give enough importance to editing. We need it. We need it all the time. And most importantly, while writing, I would say that do not be afraid to tell your story. Say your story, whether in poems or in a short story or in fiction writing. Tell your story. talk about your innermost feelings, the innermost emotions that you feel inside of you. Do not be afraid of giving it words, giving your feelings words, and putting them down on paper. And I think we are almost at the end of the discussion. So again, I would like to reiterate that in order to become a writer, we need to be a reader first. We need to read with an open mind. We need to read all kinds of stuff. I read everything that I can lay my hands on. I read almost everything in whichever language that if I can read. I can read Assamese, I can read Hindi, I can read Bengali, and in English I can read. So I read all these languages, whatever I can. So make a habit of reading, make a habit of writing. Tell your story. There are not enough stories in this world, so we need to have original stories, fresh individual stories from different individuals. So write them, tell them, and yes, happily edit them at the end. Have a mentor, talk to that person. Definitely that person will have some suggestions for you. Have a group of friends who can give you good suggestions. Keep on writing. Let the pen flow. Yes, Abhilash, I think I'm done with my discussion.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah. Thank you so much, ma'am. You have wonderfully shown the way, actually, to the many of the aspiring writers as to how to move ahead in their field of creative writing. Thanks a lot, ma'am. It was really wonderful on your part.
Thank you so much.
Moving ahead, ma'am, we have a few questions. The first question is by Sumit Ghosh, sir. He says, how does a sense of freedom in poetic writing can be arrived? Is it through any kind of practice or memory?
Or practice or?
Memory.
Memory. Freedom. The word freedom may connote different things to different people. So for me, freedom of expression is if I can do justice to my thoughts, if I can perfectly put down my thoughts in paper with the help of words. So I think that is freedom. So when you are trying to write poem, I would suggest, Mr. Ghosh, that you talk about your own feelings, what you feel inside of you. That itself should be a very liberating and sense for you if you are doing that. I hope I have gotten the question right. How do you arrive at a sense of freedom? Yes, I think you talk about your innermost feelings, and that's how you feel liberated, and that's how you arrive at a sense of freedom.
Yes, ma'am. Sania Hamza, madam, says, do you think creativity is something inherent, or can we arrive at a creative point through practice?
Yes, as I said in the beginning, these are eternal nature versus nurture debates, and yes, some people are naturally endowed with the creative juices flowing in them, but some people may require some kind of practice, some kind of editing. There have been great writers who have come out of creative writing classes. I have a few names like people like I think Catherine Benito, Elise Clark, Nicholas Searle. In our own Indian context, we have a few writers, and I'm not supposed to take the names in public, but they are products of creative writing classes. So I think it's a mixture of both. We need some kind of mentoring, some kind of editing, and yes, there has to be an inherent urge in you to write. There has to be an inherent push towards writing. That has to be there somewhere. Yes.
Yes, ma'am. Sanjikta Datta, madam, says, is it very important to use high-sounding words while writing a good poem?
No. I would straightforward say no, because if you read my poems, then I think you will find the least high-sounding words. But sometimes I have felt that in order to describe a particularly complex feeling, you may have to take the help of some high-sounding words. I would not say high-sounding words, but you may have to take help of some words which are not normally used in our conversations. So yes, that may be there. But overall, I think we should stick to words which are which can express our thoughts as lucidly and as easily as possible. And yes, let me tell you that I do not have a thesaurus. So Most people, yes, we should not just change words because we feel that, okay, fine, high sounding words will sound pedantic and it will show the scholarly in us. So I don't think so.
Shraddha Malini Das Madam says, what is the importance of vocabulary in creative writing?
Yes, vocabulary. We need to have vocabulary. We cannot be using the same kind of expressions again and again throughout our writing. We may have to describe the same kind of situations many a time, especially in fiction writing, but we cannot do this every time. I mean, we cannot just have the set forms of expression that we use in all our writings, or the kind of words that we use every time in our writing. That should not happen. That will again categorize us or our writing. So I think, yes, vocabulary is important. And that's why I said that we have to be a good reader first in order to become a writer. When you read, you expand your vocabulary. You enhance your word limits. And that again gives you an impetus while writing. So yes, we need to have a good vocabulary and a big vocabulary in order to be a good writer, yes.
Chitra Dasgupta Madam says, please tell me how you got published, because I have written and translated short stories, but there is little publication. No one is in a way accepting it to publish. Please suggest ways.
Okay. See, the most simple way is to get in touch with a publisher. That's what I did. And I think, madam, that if you are not getting published, then would it be possible for you to speak to someone who already has been in this area, someone who is already published, so that they could give you an idea of, sometimes publisher do not accept our work because they feel that this is not up to the mark, or the story has been done so many times, we do not need the same kind of stories anymore, or this particular writer has been translated, this particular story of that particular writer has been translated earlier also, and we do not want to do it again. So there may be so many factors why a publishing agency may not be accepting your work. So I suggest, madam, if you can get in touch with some creative writer, or if you can get in touch with some mentor in your own locality, please talk to that person. Maybe that person will be able to guide you better. But for us, the only way open is to approach the publishing agencies. Now, again, some people go for self-publishing also. If you are confident enough that your book is good, if you feel that, okay, fine, these stories need to be told, then I think you can go for self-publishing also. So you have two ways open to you. Kindly think about them. I would definitely help you if we were in an area where we could interact personally.
Mr. Rajiv Saha says, how can one narrow down the broader difference between a short story and a poem?
Please come again, the question.
How can one narrow down the broader difference between a short story and a poem?
The broader difference between a short story and a poem, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. In a poem, you do not necessarily tell a story. Of course, there are poems where stories are unfolded, like in Eliot's poems or in some other poems. But short stories, we normally have something in the line of a story to say. It normally revolves around an anecdote or an incident, and it has a storyline to it. So that is how we see the difference between a short story and a poem. A short story will be slightly longer in the traditional sense. A short story will be slightly longer than a poem, and a poem may not necessarily have a story. That's what I think. But nowadays, Abhilash, the margins are getting blurred between short story. You have short stories of 4 lines, poems or of 100, 200 lines. So margins are getting blurred. But then again, yes, we have some traditional demarcations, which I just said. Yes.
Mr. Satyajit says, how can we not lose the originality of the poem if we translate it?
Yes. Now, translation is another genre which needs very careful handling. So we need to be very, very conscious when we are translating something. We need to have a thorough knowledge and a complete expertise, complete hold on both the languages, the source language as well as the target language, the language from which you want to translate and to the language which you want to translate. So I think we need to have an expertise in both these languages. And apart from that, translation demands a different level of expertise, different level of creativity. So it's very important. You have raised a very pertinent question that we should aim at not losing the originality. We should stick to the text and try to translate the thought and not so much as the word to word translation thing. So I think this question will again require a completely different kind of class, Bhilash. But I think to begin with, yes, we need to have complete expertise in both the languages, and we need to be true to the original text and not try to translate word to word, but rather translate the thoughts.
Ritu Fukan Madam says, do you think writing poetry can help an individual in strengthening the writing skill? Because it seems poetry writing is the hardest form of writing.
Yes, it does help in writing, in improving a person's writing skills, because in writing a poem, we are not only condensing our thoughts, but we are expressing our innermost thoughts also at the same time, expressing them to the fullest, but in a very condensed manner. So I think that requires a lot of expertise and a constant writing of any genre of literature, poetry, short story, fiction, essay, whatever you take up and write. I think constant writing will definitely improve a person's writing skills. But we have to be constant, yes.
Mr. Key, he wants to know some websites for posting poems and short stories.
I'm so sorry. I do not know a lot of websites because I haven't done this. There are a few which I think can I do this? I mean, I can send it to Abhilash, and maybe Abhilash, you can give it to him later on. Can this be done? Because I do not have in mind right now. Yes, okay.
Mr. Rajiv Saha says, does one have to be actually creative while writing a short story? Because while reading a particular story, we tend to read like a reader more than the actual intention of the author.
Okay, do we have to be creative before writing a short story? The question is?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, while writing a short story, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. I think yes, because unless and until we have creativity, we will not have our imaginations right. We will not have the required impetus or the required background study in order to write a short story. So I think yes, as much as I said, practice and editing will also help us, but we need to have the creativity inside us. We need to have a natural instinct, a natural urge towards writing. We may not have the writing just flowing out of us just because we have a natural tendency to write. But yes, unless and until there is creativity inside of us, we will not be tempted to write. We will not even want to write. We will not even want to read for that matter. So I think, yes, creativity is important in order to give expressions to our thoughts and feelings.
Anita Madam says, what could be the form and style for beginners to write a good poem?
Yes. As I said earlier, I think beginners should concentrate on writing free verse. There are so many different forms, sonnets and rhyming lines and haiku and all that. So I would not suggest that. My experience of having taught over the years tells me that sticking to free verse for beginners gives good results. And once we are confident with the craft, then we can move ahead experimenting with other forms and styles.
Jaya ma'am says, please share your impression about the uses of dialects while writing a poem.
Yes, you can use it freely if there is a need in the poem where you need to put a dialect which you can do justice to. We should not put a dialect just in order to enhance the look of the poem. We need to use it only when we feel that there is a need to it, or only when we feel that anything else will not justify this particular thing. So yes, we can definitely use dialects. I myself have used it many a time. So that's absolutely all right, I feel. But then we again have to put a footnote because some people may not understand. Yes, Abhilash.
Ma'am says, we find it difficult to use suitable words while writing poetry. How to overcome that?
Yes, that is one question which comes about, and the solution would be in reading first. You need to read a lot before. We need to be readers first, as I said, because before we can become creators. So kindly go back to the books, read, and increase your vocabulary, enhance it, improve it, and the next time you sit down to write, I'm sure your thoughts will flow freely.
Arunita ma'am says, does the inclusion of too many characters lessens the depth of a fiction?
As a reader, I have felt this as well. Because if there are too many characters in a fiction, it somehow becomes difficult for readers to keep track of what one is doing or what they are up to, and who one was. It becomes a little difficult. But if the plot so demands, we have to introduce the characters. So I feel that we should introduce characters as and when the plot demands. If there is no demand in the plot, then I think we just should not introduce characters in order to to have characters. Like for instance, if you are writing about a college life, maybe in the initial pages we could talk about 4 or 5 friends, but then all 4 or 5 friends are not going to till the end of the fiction. I think one of them or two of them will go along with the main character. So we can have some characters according to the situation, a demand of the situation, and then we can lessen their importance or their mention towards the end. So that also can be done. So as and when the plot progresses, and if required, yes.
Dr. Nirvarinder Kaur says, in the famous novel by Raja Rao, Kanthapura, we find hundreds of characters. What is your view on that?
No, but I mean, yes. He must have thought it necessary to introduce all the characters. I enjoyed reading the book. It was one of the earliest that I read as a child. Very fond memories of the book. So yes, it is one of the biggest novels of our times, of our country. So yes, no thoughts there. I personally enjoyed. Yes.
Yes, ma'am. Angel Madam says, how to begin jotting down the thoughts for constructing something creative?
First of all, as I said, we need to gather our thoughts. We need to think of what we need to write, what we want to write, rather, which particular emotion are we going to talk about today, and based on that, we can start writing the words in random. They may not come in neat succession in the beginning. We can just have them coming in random, and later on we can move on to giving them concrete shapes, demanding on the way we have thought out the plot. Even a poem can have a plot that way. So that's how I would suggest one to go about, and that's how I've seen people arriving at solutions to their problems.
Mr. Chandrakant says, how to express the ideas in the absence of specific words, because sometimes we are at a loss of words.
Yes. It happens. Sometimes we are at a loss of words. We are at a loss of images also sometimes. And sometimes we have to make use of abstract forms of expressions. So somehow we need to do justice to that particular thought or particular emotion arising inside of us. So I think much writing is situational. We cannot plan everything in advance. So we have to put in our thoughts, put in the words or expressions or images as the situation in the writing moves. So yes, let me just say that it is situational. Let's take the help of images or abstract writing. Not, I mean, chunks of abstract sentences, but maybe a few expressions here and there should not confuse the readers.
Okay, ma'am. We'll take up one last question now. Sridevi madam says, while translating, the feel of the local dialect is lost. What is your view on that?
Yes, I have felt it. I have felt it too, and I have tried to do justice by sticking as close to the thought of the original text as possible. So I have always avoided having a word-to-word translation, because that completely, mars the very essence of translating. So it may be from a regional language to regional language. I'm not talking of translating to English, but yes, the essence somewhere uh, runs the risk of losing. Yes, I have felt that too as a translator, and I try to avoid it as much as possible. I really don't know if someone who is reading both the text and comparing them might feel that, okay, fine, a little essence is lost here, but I think that is the pain, that is the burden of translation that we carry with us all the time. So as much as we try to do justice, we may not be an exact replica of the original text. And again, I think that is where the beauty of translation also lies, that we are not an exact replica, but we are, creating the thought, and at least making it possible for other readers to understand the thought that goes in the original book. So I think that is the burden as well as the beauty of translation. Unavoidable.
Yes, ma'am. We have come to the end of the session, and ma'am, all I can say is that you have shown us the way, actually. You have shown us the path. If not many aspiring writers, there are many writers who are listening to you, and they have in a way expressed their gratitude for having acted as the path bearer to them. And you have showed them how to move about in their own process of writing. And ma'am, it was really wonderful on your part. So it's really indebted to you. Thanks a lot, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Kaushik. I'm very thankful to AIFEST. I'm very thankful to all the people who listen to me, pose questions. Yes, thank you. The pleasure is all mine. Yeah, thank you. Bye-bye.
Ma'am. To all my dear participants, you will be getting the feedback half an hour later after the end of the session. Thank you.